And with us, we have Darlyn Susan Yee, who is a Los Angeles-based artist whose practice in weaving together traditional and unexpected materials into complex designs that engage a dialogue between art, design, and craft. Her meticulous, labor-intensive processes result in fiber-based sculptures and installation. She engages in a dialogue that crosses cultural understandings of identity, gender, and place. Complex with a sense of whimsy, Darlyn's exploration of presence and containment encompass large installations to small handheld vessels. In contrast to the perceptions of architecture as high art and craft as low art, Darlyn collaborated with Yarn Bombing Los Angeles on the CAFAM, the Craft and Folk Art Museum, the Granny Square. This project, if you haven't seen it, it's quite amazing. It's the project that covered the whole facade of the Craft and Folk Art Museum with crocheted granny squares, brought together over 500 contributors from 27 countries and 50 states. Very impressive. And on the closing weekend of the Arts in the Streets at the Geffen Contemporary at MoCA, Darlyn and other artists yarn bombed their cars and Have Yarn Will Travel to showcase another form of graffiti intervention. Darlyn's work has been shown internationally in museums and galleries and has garnered numerous awards. She was included in 100 Artists of the West Coast by Schiffer Books and the publisher of her book, Macrame Today, Contemporary Knotting Projects. Her work is featured in numerous private and public collections. And I hope all of you get to see her video and her talk and her presentation. And so I welcome you, Darlyn, to please, I will share the screen with you so that you can then show us what you have.
Well, my name is Darlyn Susan Yee. It's commonly mispronounced Darlyn and Yee. Those two are the sticking points. I inherited the name. I married an Asian, and I love exploring other cultures. So part of my journey as an artist has been to learn more about other cultures. And this particular talk is mostly about the current work, but I have a full array. I've been working 5 bodies of work simultaneously. It's a little bit crazy in my studio as a result. So I'm focusing on the slideshow first, and then if there's time, I'll walk around and show you what's going on in here. So first of all, the vessels. This is how my work began. I tie knots. This is basically macrame. I learned when I was 9 years old, and I really felt challenged to create something sculptural with the knotting, as opposed to just sitting and making belts and plant hangers and so forth. I wanted things to stand up on their own, and I wanted to play with pulling different sections out and working them separately. So that's what you'll see in most of these vessels. They're all experiments. I start at the bottom, in the center of the bottom, and I work upside down over a can or a form or something that is disposable. And then when I get to a certain point, I remove that form. And each one is completely different. This one you can see is 13.5 inches tall, so it's substantial height. And yet it stands on its own. I learned really quickly to tie the knots really tight and also use yarns and strings that have a double ply twist.
Right behind Darlyn is these knitted sweaters. They're huge, and they were at the Craft and Folk Art Museum on display. Is that correct?
Actually, no, they were at LA Art Association's
Oh,
Gallery
right.
825.
Mhm.
And that was fairly recently. It was
Mhm.
October of last year. These are the ones that I started playing with at 9 years old. I started trying to form the knots into something other than just flat. So these are, I've been working them in and around all of my other work. I come back to them all the time because I never get bored with them. Now, the body cocoons, on the other hand, I've been working since about 2007, and they're intended to convey the female form. We tend to conceal and reveal our form, our shape, and that was what was brought to mind with these forms as I started creating them. Everyone's shape is different, and we move and sway differently because of our body frames. And not everyone has the standard body type. So that's my inspiration for these body cocoons. These are fully knitted, no knotting. I do crochet around the rims, and each one comes out very different. So as far as the next step in my journey, I was wandering around in a hardware store, looking for pink yarn, hot pink yarn. I was on a bent at Michael's or Joann or something. And so I'm going through this hardware store and I find this flagging tape. And I went crazy with the flagging tape for a while. I started working all of this plastic on huge hooks and needles. These are crocheted and knitted. And they're designed to be huge representations of things that we think of as home and women's items.
When you say huge, how big?
This one is 28 by 24, so it's definitely beyond wearable.
Right.
And the aprons are 58 to 65 inches. They're pretty large. And to work in this flagging tape, I found myself working for small sections at a time because it was really labor intensive and very painful to the hands. Hard to get something to slide on the hook. But then when you got it to slide, it would slide off really easily. So it took a little bit of effort to do. But then the body of work became something that was able to be shown very well. And I also worked in the barricade tape. I worked on pool noodles, sorry, swimming pool noodles. So the pool toys made slippery with pantyhose to try and get something that worked. And this particular piece has been shown probably about 20 times. And riffing on the security, danger, caution, everything always telling us where to go, what to do, what not to do. So I kind of took that in a different direction there. So my latest body of work is oh, sorry, we're not there yet. The interventions is what I call my yarn bombing exploits. And I've been doing this since 2011. I joined a yarn bombing group, Yarn Bombing Los Angeles, and I'm now the core member, one of the 3 core members of the group. And we go out and yarn bomb all sorts of things. People come to us asking us, oh, well, we have this exhibition and we'd like you to draw attention to it without putting a sign up. So there are ways that we can do something a little different. This particular one was at Pierce College and in their grand staircase. And each one of our collaborators took a tree or an element, a handrail or something along the staircase and yarn bombed it. And so this was my contribution to that. And we did this collaborative work that was at Unspace Ground with the College Art Association annual conference. And it was kind of interesting. Each of the pillows that we all contributed said, "Wish I were here." Well, that came to take on a new meaning because we were signed a specific location and then we were told we couldn't be there. We had to move our installation 4 times. And so public art, some people are going to say, no, you can't put it there. And this, even though it was temporary, this was one of the 4 locations that we had that day. Each collaborator created pillows or a pillow to contribute to this process. And this is my contribution to Have Yarn Will Travel in front of Art in the Streets. We did something a little bit different. We reserved the parking spaces in front of the museum as a slight protest to all male representation in the show. So we yarn bombed our cars and got attention in the show. Little did we know that day Jeffrey Deitch was going to have a press conference. And they drove the bus up in front and, the steamroller actually was the piece that they put in the front. It was Banksy's steamroller, and one of our crew members managed to get a little tiny knitted square up on that steamroller. I don't know how she did it, but she did. And she Banksy to Banksy. So that was a really fun day. Let's put it that way. This is the Craft and Folk Art Museum.
Wow.
They had invited us to present a proposal for their facade. And so we proposed a collaborative effort, 5 by 5 inch granny squares. Amazing turnout. This is thousands of granny squares. And we kept getting granny squares and granny squares, even well after the project was down. And this was probably the biggest size-wise and the most participation we've had. So I participate a lot with Yarn Bombing Los Angeles, but I also do my own work. This is a piece that I did for the 100 Colors installation at Otis College. And the concept was each of the 100 colors represented the 100 years of artists who came through the college. And it was to celebrate the centennial. So I love the yarn bombing. It's a lot of fun. There are a lot of different things that you can do outdoors, and it's approachable. People come and ask you what you're doing, or they say, oh, I was hoping somebody would do that. I was out front of my studio yarn bombing the other day, and a gentleman came up and said, oh, so you're the one who does this pole. So I always do the pole outside of my studio. This particular piece, the concept for the entire show, we did through Yarn Bombing Los Angeles. We presented the concept, a piece of me. What are you going to leave behind in the world? And so everyone interpreted that theme very loosely, and we needed a nameplate for the show. So this was my contribution. I often will do that for the Yarn Bombing Los Angeles pieces. And then I contributed 3 trees to the Forest for the Trees installation. This particular iteration of Forest for the Trees was coordinated by Julie Kornblum, and she got it placed at Tom Bradley International Terminal. Mm-hmm. So just before pandemic lockdown.
Oh, wow.
Whew. And then we did an installation at the Autry Museum outdoors on the Rotunda area. And this particular piece was my contribution to that large installation. The concept was California Yarnscapes. And one of the things that I like about the outdoor installations is I get to try out new techniques and new works. I had not worked in this way before. This particular piece is a knit weaving. So I've knitted the background in the basic pattern that I want, and then I've woven into the knitting. Mm. And so I found I love that technique a lot. It's almost like tapestry weaving, but not. It's not as structured. And so I think I'm going to pursue that more. I'm also developing tools that will make it simpler to work on something that's larger like that. And I've done a number of different shopping carts for various purposes. I was invited to create prop work for Etnies. And so I created this shopping cart. The other 2 items are not mine. But I did some of the knitting work for them. You can see something in the background there as well. But this shopping cart has been in 4 different productions, 4 different ways. So, okay. It happened to be in my subterranean garage in my parking space one day. And I emailed the rest of the building and said, hey, if nobody's using this, if it's not yours, can I have it? And I tried to call all the cart companies, and they had no record of that serial number there was nothing on it to identify where it needed to go, and it was too small for most of the carriers. So they're like, well, you can keep it. Okay. I will yarn bomb it. So then the current body of work, I was sitting around during pandemic. I was really disheartened by what was going on in the news, and it seemed like every day there was an assault on our rights, our privileges, our demeanor, everything we've come to know and trust as the right way to do things. So it had some to do with the previous administration, and it had other aspects that were more just human nature. How have we come to this point? So I was feeling all these things bubbling up inside me. I was wondering, well, how do I express myself? Also, my studio was undergoing a lighting renovation, and we were not supposed to be in the studio. So I came and got some of my tools and supplies and my knitting machine. I couldn't let that, get damaged or broken or anything. And it was, I needed an outlet. I had to start creating. And I started sketching in the mornings before work. Here I was working out of a very small second bedroom all day, every day. So I would sketch in the morning before I signed on to work. And I started journaling as well. And I realized that what I was journaling about was all of these pent up feelings about what was going on in the news. And so I developed this series, Wearing It on Our Sleeves. These are huge, 84 inches by 120 inches. So 7 feet by 10 feet sweaters. And that's what you see behind me when my screen is on. So each one is a thought, a concept that I heard in protest during pandemic, something that I internalized, and each one of these touched me personally. We'll come back. So climate change is really here. We're experiencing it now. What are we going to do about it? And my concept for this series is to, while we were in lockdown, everyone was screaming at each other about these issues. So to step back and say something big, kind of like a billboard, but also in a softer voice, in a softer tone, to tell people to step back, think a little, and what can we do about the situation? We're experiencing this now. It's in the news again, over and over again. Each of these issues just keeps coming back every 5, 10, 15 years. So my thought is I would like to pursue a traveling exhibit and create a number of sessions, work sessions, and community engagement activities to explore the reasons that I felt I had to say these things, the reasons these themes are recurring in our society, and what do we all collectively, that group, what can we do about it? I think that would be a very interesting way to go about displaying this work. It was shown at Gallery 825 in October. And this is an installation view of that exhibition. So if anyone has any ideas, I'm going to stop sharing now. And I'm going to look at the chat. Where is my studio and how large is it? It's pretty large. I'm really lucky to have such a large space. I've been in this building for since 2012, actually.
Where are you located?
I'm currently in Mar Vista area. Let's see. Get my phone going. And how large is my studio? This is my studio. I lucked out.
I have a black screen. Does anyone else?
No, we can see it.
Yeah, I see
Okay.
it. It's
Yeah, we
huge.
can see it.
You
Oh,
are
alright.
you are blessed, darling.
Yeah.
I didn't know there were studios in Mar Vista, so that's
That
interesting.
is amazing.
So that's an amazing space you have in Mar Vista. That's amazing.
I love the way, you know, those large gowns are reminiscent of the police giant
Mhm.
uniforms, but from a female perspective.
I agree, but I can't remember what
beautiful.
artist are those by Chris
Um,
Burden?
Yeah, I
They're
think
by
it-
Chris Burden. Have you ever seen the big giant police? That's
Yes.
the first thing I thought of when I saw them too.
Yeah,
That's funny.
but it feels like you've done it in a way that you've made it your own, you know, from a woman's perspective.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
they're great. They're great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, we
Okay.
hear you.
Okay, cool.
You just completed this huge body of work with these large sweaters, these large bodies. And I know you said you were going to try to get them to other locations. So what are you working on currently?
I am currently working on more sweaters. I am actually doing a series of 10. I had 7 completed for that show, and I'm working on 3 more. And then the next round, I foresee a series of 20 total. So I think that would be a substantial institutional show or museum show.
They're so large, they would be great like at the airport. I mean, in one
Yeah.
of their, you know, where you really have
You could be there.
a long linear stage.
Yes.
Okay.
Darlyn, what's impressive is that you created each of those 6-foot pieces by yourself. I'm just blown away by the amount of work you've done in these sweaters. I mean, I can see they're one-sided and then you do your stitching on top, but that's a huge amount of work.
They are
And-
actually 2-sided.
Oh,
They're
really?
fully finished on back. And they
Wow.
have snaps up the back to facilitate getting the frames inside. The frames snap together. I'm not sure if I can show you this, but
We could see that. Yes, we could see. But
So-
so it's
there's a stack of frames down there.
So that's what's inside of the knitted parts.
Oh.
Yes,
Wow.
yes.
wow. So they can hang freely, right? They're not
Yes.
just, oh, okay, they don't have to be against the wall.
No, and in fact, at Gallery 825, I had 3 of them suspended from the ceiling. They're not really that heavy. I was really surprised. They're about 20, 25 pounds.
Wow.
They're
that's-
very clever.
I had
Very good.
reached out to Karina about welding, and everything didn't work out for us to connect. But I found a welder who took my concept and made an improvement on it, and made it so that it slotted together. Just, it's almost like a slip joint.
Mhm.
Works perfectly.
That's-
And
Oh, I
yes,
was wondering, do you work on a large table? Or how do you see it all on the wall?
I've been working on the floor, actually.
floor.
I lay down tarps and I work on the floor. It's been awfully cold to do that. But yeah.
But I have a question about your yarn bombing. So when
Yes.
you do the proposals for the yarn bombing, do you go and measure the spaces and then create something? I mean, it's not just you're going there and it's done. You have to do a lot of preparation. Tell me
Yes.
about that process, please.
It is a process. Generally speaking, I like to have permission going into a situation, but not all of our team members do. We do go rogue on occasion. We had a yarn bombing that was, everyone measured their pieces, the thing that they wanted to yarn bomb, and they came up with these intricate designs, and we installed at the brand library, and it was going to be up for maybe about a month, and they had to take it down early because there was going to be a video shoot, and it turns out they were shooting an episode of Scorpion. So who knew? One side didn't tell the other side what was going on, and so yeah, we had to take down all of the work early.
Oh,
I have a question.
Mhm.
I'm just curious. You do those humongous sweaters, you do them on the floor. How long does it take to do each sweater?
A good couple of months. But I do work with a knitting machine. You can probably see it in the background. And if you click into my videos that I put up in the chat, you can see the knitting machine in action. I'm not sure that I can wander back there and anybody could see. Let me try wandering with the computer once I unplug.
Do you do them then in parts and then put it together?
Yes, I do. And I think you can see the knitting machine in the frame.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm working on fabricating some of the letters for the next.
Oh, I see. I
So
see.
the letters are crocheted. Sorry to make you seasick getting back there.
No, that's perfect. So we see your process, how you do, you're doing your letters and then you create the body, the colors. Are the colors important to you, how you choose them?
Yes, in a certain way. I start with a desired palette, and it's also controlled by what yarn I can get
Mhm.
in that kind of quantity.
Mm.
The fun thing about buying yarn during pandemic is it was coming one skein from one place, another skein from another place, and they didn't always match dye lots, even if they said they did.
Mm.
So I was having fun amassing enough yarn at my home studio, which is about a quarter of the size of this studio, I was going nuts. When Shelley approached us with the idea of the 12 by 12 inch square, oh, I can do that at home. Oh, good, I can do that at home.
I just think it's really interesting about all the work that was done during the pandemic. I think we'll have maybe in 5 years, we'll have a whole retrospect of what people did during what kind of art was created and how that changed our perspective of our work. I know for me, it's changed a lot. And I wonder how that affected you, Darlyn. And I guess I'll open the question to everyone. How did the pandemic affect you?
I think the biggest thing for me is becoming a little more conscious of the consumer side of making, to put it out for what purpose, to show it, to sell it, to what am I doing with this? I'm making to make. And so I've become a little more conscious of the purpose, the end goal, as opposed to just making.
You know, I was sort of curious if you could help fill in from your 9-year-old self that was doing the vessels and such, and how much was it until you got into yarn bombing? What struck me on that was the collective nature and your absolute, you know, in your face and in your voice, it seems very much a source of joy. And did that break you out of the isolation of the studio? Or had you always had that thread in some way of connecting with others while you did your work? Because
I
that
thought
seems
it was
to be
really fascinating. Yes, that you noticed that. I really do enjoy collaborating with others, but I also like creating my own work. I gravitate toward the collaborative projects where the individual can present their take on a subject. It's also really nice to be able to contribute a small portion that becomes larger than anyone could ever envision. So that side of it thrills me as well.
being in the chorus at the Met is better than being in a little studio.
And also, I think the reality of most craft-oriented work is you do it on your couch in front of the TV, and you know, not much comes of it. But to have this forum to display the work out in public, and it's okay to do something that's a little different. That opened a lot of doors for me. It
Well,
also gave me
inverts the domestic side of things.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of the craft is associated with the home and sort of being the lady of the house and doing these so-called feminine crafts.
Mhm.
And then you're taking it outside. You know, you're putting the skin on an institution. You know, you're sometimes going rogue, sometimes with permission. But I could see that would be kind of a nice inversion.
Yeah,
That's naturally in your work, at least what you showed us of the last series.
I was always the kid that would be sent out to play, and I'd either be under a tree making something, or I'd come home with something and say, "Mom, look what I made you."
Oh,
So I was not the kid that would go out and physically play. I would make. So to find this outlet to be able to do it all and demonstrate it and show the world. Also, I've found the yarn bombing to be a really cool way to draw attention to myself and to come out of my shell, because I really was much more comfortable at a party if I was sitting in a corner knitting. So
Pamela?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm curious, you were speaking of the collaborative group effort would allow you to do things in a grander scale than you could alone. But I wondered if that also has inspired you, because you're now doing it in this incredibly grand scale. If it's sort of like what's possible, and then you were sort of isolated because of the COVID, and then you sort of created this grand scale yourself.
that is very true. And I think part of it came about realizing that I had the knitting machine at home and I was learning. I had nothing better to do, so I taught myself how to tune it up. And so it's like, oh, that's the way it's supposed to sound. Oh, nice. So I realized how much more productive I could be if I found a way to work with the machine. I had always thought of the machine as being, for the production work that nobody wants to see, and so to be able to utilize a tool that I totally love, and to be able to work in a grander scale is just so satisfying right now.
Okay.
I'll probably wind up going back to the minutia at some point, but I'm feeling freed.
Yeah, and the presence in that gallery, to see the photo of all the works in that gallery, this just has to go on the road. It's fantastic. It's got to go.
That was the first thing that I discussed with the gallery director, and the work is not necessarily saleable in a nonprofit arena, but I'm not so sure that that's really the goal. It's to get the message across. So I was so grateful to have the forum at Gallery 825 to present this work for the first time.
Rena, you got to take yourself off mute.
I just want to say that there's a certain dichotomy that I find really intriguing between the sort of, the crocheting, the little wonderful, my mother-in-law crocheted the most magnificent tablecloths for all of us, even second wife, just beautiful squares, put them together. And there's this dichotomy of this sweet sort of history background of crocheting, and then seeing it when you do the bombing, and how it's almost like it metastasizes, it becomes this metamorphosis, Igor Samsa, Kafka would love it, just from this innocent little beautiful craft to this huge, powerful statements that is a collaboration. I love that dichotomy. I think it's wonderful.
Me too. And that's one of the reasons that I've helped to coordinate the Yarn Bombing Los Angeles group. I'm one of 3 collaborators, main core members, who run the group now. We've ebbed and flowed over the years, and we recently did an installation at Torrance Art Museum as part of their Ultra project, their opening project. And it was just fabulous to have a bunch of people come together at Torrance High School. And when we presented the project, we had to think in terms of, well, will the school be open by then? Will we have to be indoors or outdoors? Can we even be indoors? So it was interesting to come together with all these ideas, and we came up with a really broad concept and just threw it out there. And everyone interpreted the theme differently and pulled their own things in. Not everyone had a theme in mind. It was just pretty stuff, but it was really cool to see. And the way it all comes together, even different thoughts coming together, it shows a bright splash of color, and just draws attention to something that you've never noticed before. When we scoped out the location, the Torrance High School had this massive red fence, and they were like, what, you want to use the fence? Everybody else likes the courtyard. They filmed all sorts of things in the courtyard. Nope, I want the fence. I saw that we could do 6 feet apart. All of the different COVID rules, we could stay outside. We could install from inside or outside the fence, so they could be open or closed. All sorts of different considerations as we go along. So it was really interesting trying to present work during pandemic. And as it turned out, they could open Torrance Art Museum, actually open for the opening. So we were asked to contribute yet another piece to go inside the museum. So we took some of our additional collaborations and used those to cover another piece that we had already done. I'm not sure that I have a photo of that. No, I don't. Not handy. But yeah, it was a little crazy.
This strikes me that there is something here. It's more than just the inside and the outside. I mean, you're speaking that you really liked being part of a group, and it's sort of, the three, and you're problem solving. And to me, that's also why sometimes when you get in a group and you take on and it's collaborative, but yet there are things you're responsible for, the leadership, people grow and something bigger comes out. You're not trying to fit it into, so often we go like to get a show or something, you look to say, well, how many pieces can we fit in this small space? And you're going, no, where's the world?
I want the outside of the venue.
Exactly.
I don't care.
And then can I get enough yarn to go on all this? I mean,
well, it's interesting. Before, to my knowledge, let's put it that way, to my knowledge, CAFM had not thought of their windows as display spaces before Yarn Bombing Los Angeles presented the forest in that window. And so it was, you don't think of the space you have on the outside or the space that's facing out necessarily. And in fact, I tried to bring the outsiders into the gallery at 825 by presenting the piece that's behind me, wearing it on our sleeves. That nameplate was facing out to the street. So during open hours, the blinds were up and people saw wearing it on our sleeves in the gallery. Oh, okay, I wonder what's inside. Of course, you had to make an appointment at that point, but the phone number was on the front door, and the gallery director was in the gallery and very responsive to walk-ins. Okay, we're free. come on in. So,
I have a question for you.
yes.
I'm wondering if you would ever want to change the shape of the sweater to perhaps the pants, and work on those ideas with that design. Do you
That's-
think about that at all, or do you
I
only want to go
hadn't.
with the?
I hadn't thought about that, but it's a natural progression. Thinking, one of the things that I thought hard about was the fact that, you know, we always wear t-shirts and sweatshirts and hoodies and everything with names and branding emblazoned.
Mm.
And the thought that the crochet work is so premeditated, and everything is, all of the stitching is done by hand, very premeditated. It's definitely not fast fashion by any stretch.
I can see a follow-up project by the seat of my pants, where, yeah, you're using that part of
It
the
is so funny.
pants to put
That
a
could be
message.
interesting.
That's very funny. You know, Darlyn, I was just thinking, if you want to be entrepreneurial about it, if you could collaborate with a company where, you know, yours are the prototype, but then they could, like, I could buy a sweater that looks like that.
Hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Interesting.
Where you could order, copies, if you will, that are properly sized.
Talking
Of course, the
merchandising
scale-
your work, Darlyn. Merchandising.
No, but
your
I
work.
mean, she could have them manufactured, is what I'm saying,
Yeah,
because they're
merchandising
made
your
on a
work.
knitting machine. But I mean, of course, I don't want to diminish the significance of the scale of them. But I was just thinking about, merchandising, maybe there is, and I can't think of it right now. Maybe Dallas, you can think of somewhere. If I think of it, I'll send you the link. If I
Cool.
think of somebody who does that kind of thing.
My
There
husband
are
was saying,
some companies that do it. It could be interesting, licensing fees.
my
So-
husband was saying that I should do mugs and t-shirts and
No, I think you should just limit it to the sweaters.
You could be a Murakami. I mean, that's what you could turn it into, he has,
yeah.
he's made all those things, and then some of them
Right,
are
you
things
need to
can take away and buy.
contact Louis Vuitton and see if they can
Yeah.
collaborate with you.
Yeah, in keeping with the whole point of your exhibition, it should be something wearable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know who you could talk to is, what's the woman at the am I muted? No, at the wearable art, functional art. What's her name? Lois Lambert.
Oh,
Do you know
super.
Lois?
yeah, that's true.
Yes, I
You
do.
go talk to her.
Not personally, but I have reached out to her in the past. So
Yeah, that would be, she might just love it. She might
Cool.
love the idea. So, but I do want to commission if you do that. I'll take 5 cents per sweater.
it's funny. I've steered away from wearable art per se, because honestly, you get so much less
I
street cred and so
Oh.
forth.
Yeah, but all the artists have T-shirts with,
Yeah,
their
Murakami.
artwork stamped on it, but
Doesn't care.
your designs are very unique. I mean, I could even see it on a T-shirt with the same colors and patterns and just how it's all printed out that way. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sweater, because I would wear a T-shirt like that, or just a nice material that looks like that. They're beautiful. That's why the colors are very very fashion forward, you know, they're not just primary colors. You know, I'm looking at your purples and the burgundies and that golden yellow. It's just, they're beautiful colors and very unique. So t-shirts, I would go with t-shirts.
In less than an hour, we've taken her, we made her into a commodity.
Also, it would be bringing it back to the idea that knitting and crocheting is to wear. I mean, what you're doing is getting it out of that context, so that it would sort of be pushing it back into the homemade type of.
Yeah.
I know,
Back to that
I'm
homemaker. Yeah.
trying to balance all that.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
I think it would be great to have a small one on my desk, a little one, you know, with
Oh, a
what you're
miniature,
saying.
a miniature
A
one
little
now.
piece of artwork, you know, right there where we work.
Cool.
It is artwork after all.
The sculpture, yeah.
I have an idea. And
Just a
if
little
it comes to fruition, I will share it with you.
I definitely see it in the museum stores, you know, buying the t-shirts with all Darlyn's designs. I love it. I love it.
You flip it and you sell them the 4-inch version,
Right.
kind of the coaster size or whatever, but you go,
A little coaster.
because I think our imaginations as kids, you love something giant and you love something tiny. And so, you know,
Very
I would
true.
go, you know,
It's true, it's true. You know, I just want to say how wonderful is it, all of us, that we get to know artists like this. So many of you have worked in so many different media and just share so many unique things, and just like we never expect it. And so I just want to say thank you, because it's just a treat, you know.
Yes.
I want to say something about what it's interesting, because you were talking about getting the work out there. And isn't it interesting how your presentation has affected all of us? It not only says something about us, that we were all churning out these fun ideas based on your presentation, it also says something about our society, that all of our ideas were about how to monetize this thing. You're going out there and you're
That's an
making the
interesting
message
thought.
public. And our society has us so trained that we're saying, oh, how can you sell this? And I thought that was kind of interesting.
I know my husband is in marketing, and his first thought is, how do we monetize it?
He'll love us, he'll love us.
And I thought that was just interesting, because what you're doing is the opposite of that. And it's very inspiring to all of us, but
Well-
we're all within the context of a specific society.
Yeah, but I don't think it's all monetizing. It's also for the fun of wearing it.
Yeah.
You know, it's the idea of
That's
sharing it
true.
and getting it more out in the public to wear those messages on your body.
but-
Oh, great, you know.
but it's interesting. It makes me think, you know, that is it LACMA that's doing the Barbara Kruger show that's coming? I mean, this Jenny Holzer, I mean, using words, if you put it into its genre, get it out of its media and put it into what it relates to in terms of content, you land with really different work. I mean, I go right to Barbara Kruger. I go right to Jenny Holzer. I mean, I just think you go to where text and a really simple visual takes people to a new place. And that's, I think, your mode is this wonderful knit textual that brings the inside, outside, all that together, and your practice. But you know, it makes me wonder if you could get something written where someone gets inspired by seeing your piece and then seeing the Kruger pieces that are going to be up for, I think it's LACMA. Am I going crazy here? Help me out, Karen.
I think so.
I think
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think or go and see, you know, it just opens our doors in a new way. And because it's freshly coming from you, of the words you're thinking of, not phrases that have been out there for a long time. It's great.
What was interesting also at at the opening, there was a family with a young child. I'm guessing he was somewhere between, I'm really bad at this, 4 and 6. But he was standing in front of each of the pieces with his arms outstretched. And he would read what the lettering said. And he went all the way around the room reading. He got to end rape culture.
Ooh.
And he didn't know what those words were. He turned to
Wow.
his father. Dad, what's that? What is this? And his father said, we'll talk about that later. And I pulled the father aside a little bit later on and said, that's what I'm trying to do. Get people talking.
I have
It was
a
like this chill came over my spine
Yes.
seeing this. That's exactly what I wanted to do.
So I know a place. I mean, what I think of, I'm thinking of, I don't know how many people saw the Lego exhibit from IWY that was at Jeffrey Deutsch when they had the Chinese zodiac animals in the Legos, and they were this sort of similar size. They were really large. And Annie and Rosalie and I went, and then later I took my grandsons. We all met there, and I looked up which ones they were. So there's pictures in front. I wanted them to see something sort of creatively made, but that's a space that's really large, and you could show 10.
Yeah.
Great. All right, ladies, it's 8:16. We can, Darlyn, we can go on and on. Your work is so inspiring,
Well,
and
thank
I
you.
really appreciate you sharing your work and your ideas, and we're all inspired. I know I'm all fired up. I want to wear one of those shirts with those sayings. I love them. The colors are beautiful. And I appreciate everybody here tonight. And thank you all.